Live from the Business RadioX studio, welcome to Time Well Spent with Julie Hullett, your source for inspiring stories of busy people who have made more time to do what they love. Now, here's your host, Julie Hullett.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My guest today is one unique individual, Jamie Cox. I say unique because Jamie has figured out how to try many things without being emotionally invested and make a living doing exactly what she wants. Forgive me for using the vernacular here, but Jamie is a brand strategist who works with businesses to give them meaningful connection to their clientele. She recently founded Strange Salt, a creative collective that brings creative entrepreneurs together to build brands for small businesses. Jamie describes herself as a serial hobbyist. Just wait till you hear some of the things she has tried, from baking to rug making to inflatable chairs. Very interesting things. She and her husband, Corey, love travel, food, and beer. She is my people. She's also a spin coach, and I'm convinced there's not a lot she won't try. Welcome, Jamie. We're glad you're here today.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So let's just jump right in. You grew up in Indiana, correct?
Yes, in southeastern Indiana near Cincinnati, in a town no one's ever heard of.
And that's right in the middle of the heartland. And I believe it's Bloomington. That's where you went to school. But where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I went to college in Bloomington at Indiana University. I grew up in a really small town called Vevey. It's spelled like Vevey, Switzerland, Vevay.
Okay.
Vevey, Indiana, which is in Switzerland County. So it's a Swiss settled town.
Interesting.
Yes.
And I read somewhere, I heard you talk on a creative morning show, and you mentioned that you had a very normal family. So what exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah. So I grew up I have two older sisters. I'm the youngest of three. And my parents are both in my life currently. And everybody had very typical, we just grew up to be like functioning adults. Is the best way I can put it. Right. Like my parents they're great. And they were just so great at telling us, or teaching us how to work and teaching us what was important. Both my sisters are, my one sister is a physical therapist. My other sister has a PhD in biology. So we were just like raised to work and be successful, and we knew what was expected of us. And I am forever grateful for that. My dad worked for the federal government for 39 years. My mom was a librarian. So it's just like, I feel like it was very just textbook 90s family.
Yeah. And did any of your family members ever give you some advice that's really proven to be important in your life today?
I won't say like specific advice because I don't think I can remember. But so I grew up on a cattle farm. And so my dad worked for the government, but also had a hobby farm, which was a little bit more than a hobby farm. Like it was our lifestyle. But I think just seeing him work and then what his expectations of me and my sisters were to help him, like we would haul hay bales and feed bottle calves. Like my pride in my work, I think, comes from being around him and also just being, again, like that was expected of me, but it was never, I don't know. It was fun though. It was a fun way to spend your childhood, just running around 300 acres of land, getting into trouble.
And creating the expectation of a great work ethic, obviously.
Yes. That's and like we were literally keeping animals alive. So, they depended on us.
So how did you get from there to Nashville and then to a solopreneur? I mean, first of all, define a solopreneur for our audience?
Yeah. So I call myself a solopreneur, and I like to work with solopreneurs. And as far as what that means, it is You're a one person show. And it's kind of also the mentality that you will in this business always be a one person show. Like I'm not, we can get into work a little bit more, but with my work that I do as Jamie Cox, I'm not trying to bring anybody else in on that. I'm striving to work one-on-one with business owners. So that's kind of how I picture and describe being a solopreneur.
Okay.
It's a special place, but yeah, I moved to Nashville in, I think it was 2013, maybe 2014. And I actually moved here to get married. My husband and I had, we've been together since 2010. And we did long distance for 3 or 4 years. So I was living in Bloomington. He was living in Memphis for part of the time. He had moved to Nashville. He was slowly moving up toward me. And so I decided to meet him halfway, and we decided we were going to live in Nashville. So when I finished school, I moved here to Nashville, and we've been here ever since. It's great because it's right between both of our families. He's from Mississippi originally. Mm-hmm. And so it's just a good spot. He was in music at the time. He's not anymore, but it made sense to move here. And then the longer we've stayed here, it's just made even more sense.
That's great. That's interesting that you had long distance. Some people do long distance, and then when they're living in the same city, it just doesn't seem to work anymore. So good for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was like a good thing for us, I think too. We were both at an age where we like needed to live our own lives for a while too, but we were still, we were together when we were together, and it was great to have somebody to like drive and meet and go to a music festival with. It was like a very adventurous relationship for us when we were dating. So it was fun.
When you still have that because you travel a lot and try new things and new places. So that's good.
Yes. I feel like it set the tone for our future.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. Now, breaking down more of the industry vocabulary for people, what is a creative collective?
Yeah. So I started Strange Saw as a creative collective because I had worked in marketing agencies before. And so within a typical marketing agency, you'll have, the agency owner or the CEO, somebody at the top. And then you have people that they either have working full time or their contract with them, and they are accountable to those employees. So they'll have employees that are doing the work. So I started the Creative Collective because I love the idea of working with people. I didn't love the idea of working for someone ever again. So I started the Creative Collective, yes, with hopes of bringing other creative people together that did work that maybe I didn't do or that I wasn't as interested in doing. So I'm more interested in the brand strategy piece than brand identity, for example. So I looked for brand identity designers to bring into the fold so we could pitch bigger projects together. So that brand identity designer isn't as interested in the strategy piece, but understands the importance. So we can come together, work together and collaborate to make a great product. But we also have our own businesses going. We're not responsible for each other's work as far as, if they get a job, I'm not expected to be in it. If I get a job, they're not expected to be in it. So it's just, when we have the opportunity, we work together and if it makes sense.
Yeah. And complementary skills, which is great to have, obviously.
Yes. Yeah.
Excuse me. I want to talk about Strange Salt. I realized I'd never ask you this question. I want to know where the name came from. And let me tell you, when I first hear it, I think about a sci-fi movie or cooking, baking, maybe, which in your case, both fit. But tell me how you came up with the name.
Yeah. So I actually had a personal client that I was doing kind of one-on-one work with call me strange one time. And I thought that was funny because they didn't mean it in a negative way. They said, I actually told them, I was just very honest with them. And I was like, I don't think that I'm the person you need for this job. Like, I really appreciate, you trusting me and you supporting me, but I think there are better people out there suited for this work. And they said, well, aren't you strange? And I think they called me a strange woman. And I said, I said, oh, what do you mean? And they were like, well, most people would just kind of do the work, even though they knew that they weren't the best fit because they saw it as a paycheck. And I thought, oh yeah, no, that's not me. If I'm not interested in something, I'm not doing it. Like it's 100% or nothing for me. So that word strange always stuck with me there. And then, in all honesty, I love Cheetos. I love how salty they are. So I was like, I was all around these like other words. I was like orange dust, thinking of other names that this could be. And I was like, what about salty? And I'm kind of salty. Like I'm pretty sarcastic. But also again, I just love salty foods. So Strange Salt was born. Sometimes a name is just a name.
Yeah. And sometimes it's a Cheeto, obviously.
Yes.
Now, are your clients mostly in Middle Tennessee or across the country or the globe, or what's your scope there?
Yeah. So we work with clients all over the country right now. So I feel like naturally, most of us are based in Nashville since I'm in Nashville, and the people I work with are usually people I've met in various phases of life, whether that was through previous roles or networking events. So I think because they're in Nashville, we naturally get more Middle Tennessee area clients. But I mean, as you know, referrals are kind of everything in like the service industry, the service provider business, because, you know, a client in Nashville might have a sister or a cousin or a friend in California that just moved there and is starting a business. So we've seen that expand. And I personally have seen that happen. Also, just because I started my business during the pandemic when location did not matter, I started gravitating toward a lot of clients in California or even my hometown. I have a client that lives there. So
nice.
That when you removed location and like office, like having a physical office, I feel like it opened a lot of doors.
Well, good. That's excellent. One of the things I admire about you as I've gotten to know you is your curiosity. So if you could get an answer to just one of life's questions, just one, what would it be?
Oh, you know, I would love to know what my dogs are thinking. I spend a lot of time at home. I spend a lot of time with my dogs and I love my dogs. And I always am just so curious, like, yeah, what are they thinking? Especially when I leave, like, I'm coming back. Why are you so stressed? Like, I would just love to know.
Okay, then. Well, that's good. Out of all of life's questions, I'm glad to know.
I feel, you know, that's important to me.
Okay. Not what I was expecting, but then again, maybe so. All right. You have 2 companies, a husband, 2 dogs. You teach spin classes, and I believe you've tried at least 2,000 hobbies, right?
Yes.
Okay.
At least.
And in that same talk I referenced earlier on Creative Mornings, I heard you say that you're not emotionally attached to those hobbies, meaning that you can let them go if they're not perfect or if they just aren't you. So talk about that a little bit, especially for our listeners that are perfectionists and think that if they try something and it doesn't work out, that's a failure. And how do you work around that?
Yeah. So I like to think of hobbies the way that I think about like reading books. There are way too many books in the world for me to ever read in my lifetime. And I feel that way about hobbies too. And it's like, why am I getting so attached to something that I don't really like? Like, my time here is limited. So why not explore other things that I like? And sometimes they do stick and I do become invested in them in a certain way. Like baking, cooking, for example, those are 2 things that I feel like will always be in my life, not just because I have to cook to eat, but because I actually enjoy it. I mean, I could easily order a meal planning service and my lifestyle might change a little bit, but that element that I love so much, which is like standing over the stove after work and kind of that's my decompression time. So there are some hobbies that I think I stick with. There are others that I'm just like, I don't want to waste any more energy on this because it's just not working out. And there are other things out there I want to try. Or sometimes I am also just in the phases of life. It's like, oh, this is actually time consuming. And it's not for me right now. But even if I do like it enough, I know it will come back to me. So for example, I was super into punch needle, which is like rug making. You take a little needle and so that is time consuming though. And it takes a lot of concentrated energy because I have to know what my kind of plan is for the rest of the piece.
And patience.
Like, yes. And patience. Yeah. It's a lot of little tiny work, but that for me, it was a good time for me, or a good thing for me when times were slow. And then when things got busy, it wasn't. So I was like, okay, I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to keep all the stuff I bought for it. It's in a cabinet. And one day I'll come back to it. I know I will.
And do you think you might ever revisit rug making, which I read was a flop?
So that started because of the punch needle. I'm like, oh, this is how you make a rug. I do feel like I will revisit it with the appropriate tools. I was going to make a whole one by hand, which would have taken a long time and probably would have not been as sturdy as I wanted it to. So I think I'm going to get a tufting gun eventually. That's kind of my dream.
And I know from my personal experience, you're an excellent baker. I know you're an avid reader. What do you think? Which hobby do you think truly gives you the most joy?
I definitely think, I think cooking specifically. I love baking, but I think I'm actually cooking my way through a few cookbooks right now. And it's kind of a fun, the cookbooks I usually pick out have some story to them. So it's like it marries a lot of different things I like to do. So there's like storytelling and that reading component. There's also like trying new things. Just like I was looking at a recipe in this Indian cookbook I'm doing that's like soft shell crab. And I was like, oh, I don't think I've ever cooked that. So it's just trying something new. And then it's also cooking. So I love that hobby. I think, like I said, I think it will be the one that's in my life the longest.
Oh, good. With all the activity, what would you like to share with people about how you can prioritize things so you get to maintain balance and try different things?
Yeah. So I keep a very, I'm like hard and fast by my calendar. So on usually like Saturday or Sunday night, I'll look ahead on my calendar and kind of figure out, okay, what nights don't I have anything going on? I would like to keep it that way. So if somebody texts me or calls me and says like, hey, do you want to grab a drink after work? Or do you have time today? I try to set those clear boundaries that like, no, I do have time, but that time is for me. So keeping that time to myself but filling it with things that I like to do. So for example, cooking after work that day, or sometimes there's like just a documentary that I want to watch. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to watch this on that day. So I try to just, keep some rules around my calendar so it doesn't get out of control. And so that I always have time for myself, even if it's just like an hour in the evening.
Excellent. That's a good tip. Scheduling time for yourself. I mean, who would think you'd ever have to do that? But we do these days.
I know. Otherwise it gets out of control, especially if you're like sharing calendars with like your significant other or friends. It's like easy to seem like your calendar's open when it's really not.
Yeah, exactly. In the 2 years we've known each other, I've had a couple of brainstorming sessions with you, which I have absolutely loved. And I want to do another one really soon because it's so fun. Jamie and I'll sit around and she'll say, oh, we could do this. Or I'll say, oh, we could do this. Or how about this? And one thing leads to another, which on my own, I don't know that I would sit around and do that. But you definitely inspire me to think creatively. Your mind seems to go like a million miles a minute. And you live life on the go quite a bit, from what you've described with your husband and travel and music and weekend guests and all that. So can you do nothing? Can you absolutely do nothing?
I feel like yes, because I love doing that. because I'm so on the move and like my brain is going a lot of the time. we were in Cincinnati this weekend visiting my family. And when we got back, I was like, I'm just going to lay in bed, awake, not asleep, just lay in bed. And I just stared at the ceiling for a while, for probably like 30 minutes. And I was like, okay, that was the rest I needed now we're going to go do something else. So I feel like in short bursts, I can do nothing. I'm not like when you go on vacation, I'm not like I can sit on the beach for hours and hours. There's other things that I want to do. But when I'm at home in a place that's comfortable and I know there's like nothing to be done, like I don't feel like there's other people telling me to do things or asking me for something, that's when I can truly do nothing.
Well, that is a gift because a lot of people can't be still for 5 minutes, much less 30 minutes. So that's great. In all the things that we've talked about today, I'd just like to let the listeners know, Jamie, her creativity, her sense of adventure, she's also a very thoughtful friend. One time we were having a conversation about baking with cherries, and I had found a cherry pitter, which was a life-changing event. And the next time I saw her, she brought me a huge piece of homemade cherry pie. It was so good. And it probably really was 2 pieces, but in my mind, it was 1, and I ate the whole thing, and it was fabulous. So,
hey, that's fine.
I'm just so glad you kept that baking hobby. So thank you for that. Okay. We are going to jump in here and do a lightning round. Are you ready?
Okay. Yes.
All right.
Always.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Window or aisle?
Window.
Dinner in or dinner out?
Dinner out.
Staycation or vacation?
Vacation.
Introvert or extrovert?
I think I lived a long time thinking I was an extrovert. And I actually, talking about that nothing time, I think I'm a little bit of like an introverted extrovert. That's what I call myself. Okay. Best of both worlds.
And self-aware, I might add.
Yes.
Mountains or beach?
I think I'm going to go mountains. Not a fan of sand.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
All right. And if you had a time machine, what decade would you like to visit?
I knew you were going to ask this, and I thought about it a lot. I think I would go to like the 70s, like late 70s, early 80s. I really want to hang out with my mom when she was like in the 70s. She's so cool.
So you can only imagine then, right?
Yes. And her fashion sense was just impeccable. So I would love some tips from her.
Okay. Good to know. Well, Jamie, thanks so much for being with us today. To wrap up, please tell people where they can connect with you online.
Yeah. So you can find Strange Salt at strangesalt.com, and you can find us on all the social channels from there. And then you can find me personally on Instagram. It's JMER Cox.
Okay. Thank you again so much.
Thanks for having me, Julie.
All right. I'd like to close now with a tip for you all. It's a time-saving tip to help you make the most of your free time this month. Before you start your next project, be it a home renovation or a company-wide presentation, ask yourself why you're interested in taking on the project. How will completing the project serve you? When you understand the why behind the work you do, the project will become more meaningful. You'll have more motivation to pull through when times get tough, or you'll become so stressed out about the work you can't stand it. If you can't find a good reason to take on a project and you have the opportunity to pass on it, consider how you could use that time to do something you care about. Thank you all again for listening. For those of you that are just dying to ask me a question, please connect with me via LinkedIn or Instagram. I answer every message. See you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Time Well Spent with Julie Hullett. This show is brought to you by Julie Hullett Concierge LLC, a personal concierge service in Nashville, Tennessee. Learn more at juliehullett.com.